Mercedes gave an 18-year-old the most pressured seat in Formula One. And after Zandvoort, half of F1 Twitter said he is already World Championship material, and the other half says he's totally overhyped. Here are the 3 reasons he is World Championship materials and the one massive flaw that could stop him. So let's start with what I think is the biggest reason Kimi Antonelli has World Championship potential. His raw pace, because you don't get handed a seat at just 18 years old just because people think you might be good. You have to be seriously fast. And we've actually seen that pace this season. Look at Canada. Kimi wasn't just cruising around in a quick Mercedes, he was right in the middle of a proper fight with George Russell at the front. The two of them were swapping positions and fighting for the race lead before Russell's power unit problem took him out of the race. Kimi went on to win and extend his championship lead. And then there's Zandvoort. Even though it was a pretty messy weekend for Kimi, he still put the Mercedes in P3 in qualifying, just 0.031 seconds behind Russell. And Kimi admitted himself that he made a mistake at turn 1 and thought they could actually have a shot on pole. And that's what I find so interesting about Kimi. Even when he's not having the best weekend, the underlying speed is still there. In fact, F1's own data shows that so far, Kimi has actually had the slight edge over Russell on 1 lap pace, with the average qualifying delta of just 0.054 seconds between them. Now, obviously, George Russell is not some random teammate. He's an incredibly quick driver who already has won Formula One races. So if you're an 18-year-old, well, 20 now, and you're already going toe-to-toe with a driver like Russell, then that's when I start thinking, okay, he isn't just a hype driver. This guy is generally fast, and I think that's the first thing that every World Championship needs. You can improve your racecraft, your consistency, your tyre management, but that natural ability to jump in a car and immediately find those few tenths, you can't really teach that, and Kimi seems to have it. But the problem is, being incredibly fast is only half the battle, because if you're going to win a World Championship, you can't just be quick. You have to deliver when it matters, and that's where Kimi's biggest question mark starts. Although being a fast driver can win you a championship, actually being a championship caliber driver is about what you do when you're not the fastest guy on track. And this is actually where I think Kimi Antonelli has surprised me the most. Look at Zandvoort. Mercedes didn't have the outright fastest car. Lando had it on pole and went on to win the race, but Kimi still brought it home in P2 while George Russell finished P3. That might not sound spectacular compared to a win, but championship contenders don't need a win every weekend. They need to maximise the weekends where winning isn't possible. And that's something we've seen from Kimi. He started the year with 5 consecutive wins, which is ridiculous in itself. But what's more important to me is that he's continued scoring heavily even when that winning streak ended. He now leads the championship by a significant margin, and I think that's the difference between a driver who is just really fast and a driver who can actually win a championship. Because imagine you're fighting for the title. You turn up to a circuit and suddenly your car isn't the fastest. You can't win. Do you panic? Do you start forcing things? Or do you just take the points that are available and move on to the next race? Even when Kimi had a damaged car, he tried his best to bring home points. And Kimi is starting to show that he can do the latter. And that's another thing I really like about this. At Zandvoort, Kimi admitted that he made mistakes in qualifying. Described the weekend as a bit of a wake-up call. But instead of letting that turn into a disaster, he recovered and finished second. That's important, because a World Championship season isn't going to be perfect. You're not going to win every race. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to have bad weekends. You're going to have races where the car just isn't there. The great drivers are the ones who limit the damage. And Kimi is starting to show that he has that ability. But there's one thing stopping me from completely buying the World Championship argument. Because if I'm completely honest, Kimi's biggest weakness right now is actually connected to what we just talked about. He's still making too many mistakes when he's pushing to the limit. And that's where this gets really interesting. Unlike last season, where Kimi's mentality was hindered, this season we've seen how he has matured and isn't putting so much pressure on himself. Even though he's leading the championship, he seems incredibly comfortable with the pressure that comes with being the guy everyone is trying to beat. Before Zandvoort, Kimi had a 50-point championship lead and 6 wins from the 11 Grand Prix. And instead of talking about protecting the lead or driving conservatively, he basically said he wanted to drive as freely as possible and not think about the championship at all. And I actually think that's a really good sign. Imagine being 19 years old, now 20, leading the Formula One World Championship with Lewis Hamilton, George Russell and Lando Norris and all of the established drivers trying to take it away from you. That's an insane amount of pressure. And then Zandvoort happens. He makes mistakes in sprint qualifying, then makes another mistake in Q3, and then suddenly George is looking stronger all weekend. Kimi himself called it a wake-up call and admitted he needed to make sure that he was still delivering when it mattered. But what I like is what happened afterwards. He didn't completely fall apart. He started the Grand Prix, made 2 really strong starts, fought his way forward, and eventually brought the car home in P2. And Kimi himself said those starts were what really saved his races. And that tells me something. He's learning. He's making mistakes. He's getting humbled, but he's actually recognising what went wrong instead of making excuses. And that's something you need if you're going to become a world champion, because nobody has a perfect championship season. Verstappen doesn't, Hamilton didn't, Schumacher definitely didn't. You're going to have weekends where you mess up. The question isn't whether Kimi will make mistakes, the question is how quickly he learns from them. And so far, I'm pretty impressed. But this is where I'm going to give you the other side of the argument. Because if we're being completely honest, Kimi's mentality might be one of the biggest strengths and the biggest weakness. He wants to attack. He doesn't want to back down, and that's exactly what makes him exciting. But sometimes he pushes way too hard. And that brings me to the one massive flaw that could stop Kimi from becoming world champion. So we've talked about the pace, we've talked about the consistency, we've talked about the mentality. But if I'm going to be completely honest, there's one thing stopping me from saying Kimi Antonelli is already world champion material. He still makes too many mistakes. And I don't mean the occasional mistake, every driver makes those. I'm talking about the moments where Kimi has the pace, has the opportunity, and then pushes just a little bit too far. And Zandvoort has the perfect example. Kimi admitted that he made a mistake at turn 1 in Q3, and that mistake cost him a shot at pole. He still qualified third, just 0.031 seconds behind Russell, so the pace was clearly there. But that's exactly the problem. When the margins are so small, one mistake can make the difference between starting first and starting third. And over a championship season, those tiny differences add up. And we've already seen Kimi's aggressive approach get him into trouble this year. That's the part of his game he needs to clean up. Because right now, I don't question whether Kimi is fast enough to be a world champion. I don't question whether he's mentally strong enough. I question whether he can go through an entire championship season without throwing away points he doesn't need to throw away. And that's a completely different challenge. You can be the fastest driver on the grid and still lose a world championship because you turned a second place finish into a DNF trying to win a race that wasn't there. And that's where Kimi needs to learn from drivers who have already done this. Verstappen is probably the perfect example for this. Earlier in his career, he had the same mentality, maximum attack, every lap, every corner. But as he became more experienced, he learned when to attack, and just as importantly, when to take points. Kimi is still learning, and honestly, that's why I'm not worried about it yet. He's still incredibly young. If this is his biggest weakness in his game, I'd rather have a driver who needs to learn when to stop pushing, than a driver who doesn't have the speed to fight at the front in the first place. So, to answer my question, is Kimi Antonelli actually world championship material? Honestly, yes. The raw pace is there. He's already shown he can fight at the front and go toe-to-toe with an experienced teammate like George Russell. The consistency is starting to come. He's learning how to turn a difficult weekend into a big point haul instead of letting it completely derail him. And mentally, I think he's shown something really impressive. He's dealing with an insane amount of pressure at an incredibly young age. And if he's going to win a world championship, he has to learn when to go for wins and when to simply take the points. But here's the thing, I'd rather have to teach a driver how to control incredible speed than teach a driver how to find it. Kimi has already done the hardest part. So no, I don't think it's so crazy anymore to call Kimi Antonelli a future world champion. I think the biggest question is when, and talking about how many he can win in the future. Well, I want to know what you guys think. If you had to choose right now, Kimi, Verstappen or Norris, or someone else completely different, who are you putting your money on to win the 2026 World Championship? Drop your pick in the comments below. I am Lyrics on Track, and I will see you guys on track.